I don't know how often this happens to you, but sometimes I'm reading along in the Bible and I'll come to a story or I'll come to a verse, something that Jesus may have said or did, and I'll go, what is up with that? Have any of you ever had an experience like that before? I have, and I have a number of those cases that I'm still working on. In fact, today we're going to look at one of those events. It happened on Monday of Holy Week. What is your favorite word to call this week? You know, today's Palm Sunday, and then this week ushers in the week, leading up to Easter. And some call it Semana Santa, or Passion Week, or Resurrection Week. And college kids call it Res Week. But whatever your favorite title for that is, on Monday of that week, of this week, in the last week in the life of Jesus on this earth, one of those events happened that for many years I looked at it and I thought, what is up with that? But we'll try to make sense out of that in just a few minutes, and I'll direct you to that passage and we'll work on it together. Holy Week, Semana Santa, Easter. Did you know that a Gallup poll shows that 25%, 1 out of 4 Americans, doesn't know the meaning of Easter? I think we still have a mission to accomplish, don't we? In fact, many of you know that I was at South Padre Island all week, and Gino accused me of playing in the sand. But we have a huge sculpture. You can go ahead and show that picture up there on the screen there, DJ. Every day there's a professional sand sculptor that comes down, joins us on the island. He's from New York. And he makes a huge sand sculpture. I think I showed you a picture of one of those last week. Does a different one every day. It's about the size of a church van. But one of the college kids are all around on the beach, and 2 spring breakers, not on our team, but guys down there just there to party, came up, and it was a big sculpture of Noah and the Ark. And he came up with his buddy and said, "Whoa, check out Noah and the Ark. And there's Moses." And so he was a little bit confused by that. Maybe he was in the class of the 25% who don't know what Easter is about. But I did want to give you a report. I appreciate those of you who've asked. And we had a fantastic time this year at Beach Reach. And that's my friend Buddy Young. We went to college together. And Buddy is the BSM director at WT. Now it's called West Texas A&M University in Canyon. And it's really ironic that Buddy lives in Canyon because he grew up in Hawaii. And if you've never been to Canyon, those are different from each other. But he said, well, we have lots and lots of beach, just not very much water. And that would be the case. But Buddy is the one that actually leads up this effort. And I put some numbers up there. Picture 110 church vans in your parking lot this morning. That's what we had at South Padre Island this week, giving rides to 15,000 college kids who were there to party. There were 1,100 of us on the team, wonderful group of energetic college students. Texas Baptist Men, a group came down from Amarillo, and another group came down from Fort Worth and set up in 2 different places. We do a midnight pancake breakfast and then a morning pancake breakfast in the parking lot of Island Baptist Church. And they fed 11,000 spring breakers free pancakes this week. 174 college students went to South Padre Island for spring break and met the Lord because of those 1,100 college kids who were there serving them. And we end the week, well, not really the end yet, but anyway, Thursday afternoon every year at Beach Reach, we have a baptism service. And this young lady is Courtney, and she got baptized there at the beach along with 51 other college kids. So, fantastic week, and I appreciated your interest and your prayer support. We had tens of thousands of people praying for us. It was a fantastic time. And I know you guys had a mission team here from, do they pronounce it Salina or Selena? Selena. They pronounce it properly. from Selena up near Dallas, and they were here working over in Acuna, and I enjoyed seeing the pictures, I guess. Alfonso, did you post those? Did he leave mad? Oh, okay, good. All right. Okay, good. Well, anyway, I saw the picture that he posted. I'm glad he did that. So let's think about the week leading up to Easter. Today would be Palm Sunday. And remember what happened? That was the event in which Jesus made his triumphal entry. It was like a parade coming into Jerusalem. You know, for a long, long time, the nation of Israel had been waiting for what they thought was going to be a political ruler king. In fact, the parade that they had on that Palm Sunday would have been the same kind of event that you had to inaugurate a new king. And what people did is they would put their cloaks or their coats down on the ground in front of the king as he would walk into town. And if you didn't have a cloak or a coat, then you would cut a leaf off of a palm tree, you know, those big old leaves about this big, and you would lay that on the ground, and then the king would walk into town on top of that carpet of garments and palms. And prophecy was fulfilled that day that had been made 500 years previous, that's what it would look like when Jesus came into Jerusalem that day, and those prophecies were fulfilled. So that was Palm Sunday, and that would be today relative to next Sunday, Easter Sunday. And I went ahead and put on an outline. If we can go to that next slide there, DJ. Went ahead and put on an outline the events that led up to Easter Sunday. Wholly 40% of the New Testament contains the events in that 1 week. So, you know, that prompts us to the magnitude and the importance of that week. And I went ahead and put that there. And, you know, it was spring break week. I'd hoped to get this outline in your bulletins, but, you know, being spring break, we didn't quite get that done. But you can just start in Luke 19, and this week you could read through chronologically the events that took place the week leading up to Easter Sunday. And I'll be doing that, and maybe you can too, and you see, you know, some of the outline there. Those are real important things that happened in the lives of our lives, actually, in the lives of the community of Israel. Well, let's look at the next slide. And Monday of Holy Week, or Semana Santa, there was this event that I remember for years. When I would read this story, it just didn't match my picture of God. And all of us has a picture in our mind, a mental image of what God is like. That was nurtured in our homes and in our Sunday school classes, by Sunday school teachers, and maybe by coaches and neighbors and family members, and hopefully, you know, your experiences in church. We have this picture in our mind of what God is like. And then we read a story like this one, and it takes us, for me anyway, a little bit off balance. Read along with me, if you would, in John chapter 2. All four of the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, have this story recorded there. So it's important to all of them. It's interesting, however, to note that in John, where we'll be reading this story the first time today, is in the 2nd chapter. And in all the rest of the gospel accounts, it's toward the end of the book. You know, that 40% of the New Testament that, you know, is about the events of Holy Week. Well, for John, chronology wasn't important. And his purpose of writing the book of John is so that we would understand the meaning behind the man of Jesus. And so this was such an important event in his mind and in his heart that he put it real early in his book, although it happened late, you know, that last week in Jesus' life. So with that brief introduction, let's read along here and see what you think. See if there's some surprises in this story for you, like there have been for me for so long. Now, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, this was Monday, in the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at the tables exchanging money. So Jesus made a whip out of cords and drove them out of the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Does that story surprise you? Does that seem out of the character of Jesus to do something like that? I asked Marilyn for permission this morning to use her as an example. And so I'm doing this for permission, just so we will get the picture of what we just read about, and could be just benign words off of a page. Let's get the picture. What if, in the middle of this service, Marilyn stood up, meek, mild, though highly talented Marilyn, stood up and came up and pushed this podium over onto the floor below. And then she came around the table and she upturned this, Lord's Supper table that we have here in front. And you would be thinking, "Marilyn, tranquilate, calm down. What is happening, Marilyn?" That would have been the same response to all of the people as they observed Jesus doing this thing. It reminds me of that book, the children's book, Alexander the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Is Jesus just having a bad day? Or maybe it's, he feels the stress. Being the Son of God, he knows very well what's coming up. Is he just already feeling the pressure and the stress from his arrest and ensuing trial, and then the mocking and the beating and the crucifixion? Is he just stressed out? Why in the world did Jesus do something like that? Well, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but I wanted to paint a cultural context because, frankly, we have some semblance of temples. This building would be a semblance of temple for our day. But really, we have nothing in our world, in our culture, that really compares very much to the temple in which Jesus did these very surprising things. It was lavishly built by Solomon, 10th century BC. Remember, it was promised, God promised David, Solomon's son, that they would get a temple, but that David wouldn't get to build it, but that his son would, Solomon, and he did. And so actually, over a period of 7 years, they built the temple. And in today's dollars, when we read that description of the temple in the Old Testament, you can calculate the price of this temple in which Jesus did these things was between $3 and $6 billion. It was one of the most impressive buildings in all of the ancient world. And in fact, there was a replica just in the last 10 or 15 years built in Brazil of this temple, and it cost $300 million to build that building. Well, the same building then was destroyed 400 years later because, the rhythm of the day was a nation would conquer a nation and destroy all their buildings and, pillage everything that they had and kill a lot of their people, and then they would build their own deal until another one rose up to power and then come, and then they'd do that back, and they did that over and over again. And so this same temple was destroyed like that 400 years after it was built. During the time of Jesus' day on earth, that temple was under reconstruction by, of all people, Herod. He was organizing and funding the reconstruction of this very temple. In fact, it had already been going, the reconstruction, this is a real serious home remodel job. They'd already been working on it for 46 years, rebuilding this building. And then even after the crucifixion and resurrection, another 20 years, 66 years total, was this same building rebuilt. Let's go back, though, to the very beginning of that temple. And these are some things that are written in the Old Testament about the temple. First of all, when Solomon inaugurated it, and this can be some 1 Kings in your Bibles, 1 Kings chapter 8 says this. When Solomon inaugurated it, and he even invited, and this was really a shock to the people of the day, he invited non-Jews to come to the dedication of this new building. Now keep in mind that this was a time and this was a culture when prejudice was very much the order of the day. And it was not politically incorrect. In fact, they were proud of their prejudice. And some of that is rooted in the heart of God, wanting them to be a separate people so that God could show the whole world what He's like by the way He related to them. So they were separate by choice. They were separate by command. They were a separate people. So when Solomon invited people outside of the nation of Israel to come to the dedication of this new building, well, there would have been, gossip all over town. What does he think he's doing? Inviting them to come to the inauguration. And this is what it says in 1 Kings. Thus all peoples of the earth will know your name and revere you, as does your people Israel. And they will recognize that your name is attached to this house that I have built. Those are the words of Solomon. He knew then that this temple was not only supposed to be a representation of the presence of God for the people of Israel, but for the whole world to see. And so he invited them to that building dedication. And then this written in Isaiah about that same building, even them, the non-Jews, I will bring to my holy mountain. It's where the temple was built. And make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings, the outsiders, those who were kept away, their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer, and here's a real key word coming up, for all nations. So though this was seen by the nation of Israel as their place where they could encounter and meet God and make their offerings, in anticipation of the crucifixion of Jesus, and would come and worship there, it was also intended to be a place where the non-Jews could come as well. Now the non-Jews, though, were kept in what was considered the outer courts. I have a picture here. Of course, there are no photographs, from the first century, but from the writings of the Old Testament, the very detailed writings, artists are able to create pictures like this, so we'll get an idea of the temple. The temple was, I forgot to mention how big it was. It covered, that outer wall covered a quarter of a square mile. For those of you who think in acres, that was a 160-acre campus, that site was. So it was a big building. Go into the next slide and see a profile picture of it and see how really magnificent and large this building was. But the non-Jews then were given areas on the periphery, inside the walls, but outside of the temple, where they could come and where they could worship and where they could pray, and they too could also encounter God. But what happened over the years? The temple's purpose had been skewed. And this is not a parable for all of us. We can start off on such a good track, and before we know it, we end up in a place that we didn't decide day by day that's where we were going to go, but we'll end up in this place way away from where we were really intending to be. And that's what happened to the temple. Little by little, year after year, the purpose of the temple had eroded in their minds. And it came to this point. It became a place for the money changers. Let me explain how that happened. Every year, every Jewish man aged 15 and over was required to pay a temple tax. It was the equivalent of 2 days' wages. And so it was at Passover week that all of these people would come. 2 million people were probably in Jerusalem when Holy Week took place, what we call Holy Week took place, because all the men, Jewish men, within a 15-mile radius of Jerusalem were required by their law to come that week and to pay their temple tax. Now, the temple tax had to be paid in Galilean currency. In other words, the official currency of the nation of Israel. But people came from all over the known world for these events leading up to Passover. And so they brought with them currencies from all the places that they came. We live in a place where we're aware of, currency exchangers, aren't we? And you can go down close to the river and you'll see Casa de Cambio and, these places where you can go exchange your American dollar for Mexican pesos or vice versa. And, they get a commission for that. Those guys aren't missionaries. They have to make a living off of their exchanging, those currencies. And that's well and good. It's all on, up and up, and we all understand that. But what would happen if you went down to the Casa de Cambio and you said, okay, I want Mexican pesos for my dollars, and you get pesos back. Then you walk out and you think, you know what? I think I changed my mind. I want my dollars back. And so you would give him the pesos he had just given you. Guess what? You get fewer dollars back, don't you? Because he has to make a commission. There's nothing dishonest about that. That's how he makes his living. And then you walk out the door and you go, no, you know what? I changed my mind again. I think I'm going to Acuna after all. Give me pesos for my dollars. Well, if you do that enough times, how much money do you have left? You spend it all on commission. Well, these men were making commissions like that in order to exchange the currency so they could pay their temple tax in this Galilean currency. But here's what happened. They would exchange the equivalent of 2 days' wages for a man, and the commission was a day's wage. 30% commission. So, of course, it became a racket. And these guys who did this did so because they were insiders with the temple chiefs, and so they got preference, and they were able to make exorbitant profits up to $16,000 in 1 week. Not a bad gig. That's what was happening the day that Jesus walked in the temple and started turning stuff over. All right, let's go to the next group. The sellers of the animals. Another thing that happened daily, not just on Passover week, but daily in the temple is, the families would come there and they would offer an animal sacrifice. And depending on their income, it would either be a dove or a lamb or a calf. And so they would offer their sacrifice, but in order to do so, it had to be, remember, without blemish. It had to be a perfect specimen. And so they would come, and if they brought one from, around that they had purchased or had raised in the countryside, the inspectors would always find something wrong with it. Say, no, you can't offer that dove as a sacrifice. Look, it has a gray feather, and it has to be all white. You can't offer that lamb. Look, it has a crooked toe. They would pick something out and say, you can't do that one. But conveniently, we have right over here a great selection of absolutely perfect doves and lambs and calves. And so we'll just sell you one of those. So eventually the people got to where they wouldn't even try to bring their own animals. They'd just come to the temple prepared to pay. But guess what the prices were? Out the roof. 75 times the market value was common. So it was an abusive, usurious, profiteering system that had happened over the years and eroded to this. And then the temple booths. In the outer court, remember where the non-Jews were supposed to be able to come and worship? Guess where they set up all the booths for the money changers and the animal sellers? It was like a flea market. But they had to pay for their booth, they had to pay for their table, and guess what? Annas, who was the chief priest, had all his family members who then were the ones who had set up the tables and charge people, and they again would charge them exorbitant rates. And so the people were just being taken advantage of. Okay, is the picture starting to make sense? This is what Jesus walked in on. And justifiably, he was incensed. That's why Jesus did what he did. No, it wasn't just about money. That would have been enough probably. I don't think it was about that. And as I read the story and studied and trying to ingest it, I'm thinking, of all the people in the room who need to hear the part about the warning toward, profiteering from the exercise of our faith, I'm the one in the room who needs to pay attention most to that. I really am. Did I not follow their example and end up motivated by profit instead of what was purely supposed to be, worship and service to the people? So I'm the one, and I'm taking note of that. But there was another thing that happened. I already alluded to it. People were being kept away. And I think that's what ignited this response of Jesus to all of this that was going on in the place. Because you know what? When those booths were set up, guess who couldn't come? The people who needed to hear the message of God the most. They couldn't even fit in the building, inside the wall. They had no place to stand. They had no place. And remember, the temple symbolized the very place where you could encounter the presence of God. They were kept out. The temple symbolized the very hearing ear of God. And they were kept away, kept from being able to come. Well, so what does that mean for us today? Just an interesting story, and finally, hopefully, maybe relieve some of the tension of, wow, Jesus, what are you doing? Okay, now I get it. And what I tried to come up with a story that would be applicable in my life so that I could relate more to this. And this is the best I could come up with. Some of you could probably help me come up with a better story. But it'd be something like this. Let's say I have a great bass boat, and I keep it out at the lake. And but I don't live in Del Rio. And but I have a friend who's is real capable, meticulous kind of a guy, takes care of stuff, not reckless, responsible. And so I give him the keys to my boat. I say, take care of my boat while I'm gone. And so I entrust the boat to him. But then I also say, you know what though? I have this nephew, and he lives in Del Rio, and the kid really loves to fish. And so what I would like for you to do is take my nephew fishing with you. And so I'm letting you use my boat. And the only thing I'm asking back is for you to share the blessing with another. Share it with my nephew. So I leave town. Well, I get a call from my nephew. And he says, Uncle Robert, I don't know what happened. We'd planned this day to go fishing with your buddy. And I got out to the lake, and I was walking down the dock, and he was there. The boat was in the water, and rods and reels and poles and everything was ready. And when he saw me walking down the dock, he real quickly untied the boat from the ramp, from the boat dock, and took off without me. He didn't let me go fishing. And I'm thinking, well, we don't know what happened. It probably won't next week. We'll just wait and do it again next week. Next week I get a call. Uncle Robert, can you believe what happened? Same thing happened again. Before long, I'm going, I entrusted my friend with my boat and asked him to include my nephew in this blessing of this boat, and he has excluded him. Okay, that picture, I grant it wanes. Because there we're talking about a fishing trip, and here we're talking about eternity. But eternity was at stake. And for Jesus to observe these people who needed the message most being left out, he's justified to turn over tables, wasn't he? He's justified making a whip. For one thing, it was the last week that temple was going to be needed. Because from Sunday on. You know, the temple of the Holy Spirit is going to be all of us in whom Jesus comes and makes his dwelling. So it wasn't going to be important. It couldn't be important anymore. But the Jews had a new chapter coming up, and they need to start getting the word now that no longer is God only ours. And from that next Easter Sunday on, you know, God's appeal is for everybody. And so Jesus initiated that day, the beginning of a new day in the whole nation of Israel, that the outsiders are welcome as insiders from then forward. How does this apply to us? Taking a risk this morning, I realized, you know, I cut it a little bit short. I didn't think y'all were up for a 3-hour message, you know, cover all the stories in the first week, you know, the last week leading up to Jesus, but I'm getting close to the margin anyway. I'm feeling it. Okay, so I'm hurrying, but I'll tell you a story. I guess it was 15, 16 years ago. I was standing right over here, and Wes Lewis was here, and he had just met a man who was visiting First Baptist Church for the very first time, and because he came through that door carrying a cup of coffee. Well, I don't know if the signs are still up. No coffee, no food, no drink. I guess I'm breaking the rules. I have my water bottle right there. But, you know, you're not supposed to bring food in here. We understand that. And so Wes, and y'all know Wes, you know, the gentle giant, he could not have been kinder and gentler. But he, you know, he wanted to let this man know we can't have coffee in the sanctuary. They'll get on the carpet and make a mess of things. And the man was gracious, and he got it. You know, there was no conflict. There was no, you know, scene made right there. And so the man went back with his coffee and through the door. And I just thought about it for a minute. And it really wasn't then on the spot. I need to think about it for a while. But then I talked to Wes about that later. And I said, hey, Wes, I understand the rule. You know, we don't want the place made a mess. What if that man had been far, far away from God for a long, long time? And that Sunday morning, he decided to give God one last shot. And what if somebody not as gracious as you would have been the one to keep him back? What could have been the consequences of that? And then, I guess implying the rhetorical question, what's more important, carpet or people? And what had happened in the temple, their money and their place have become more important to them than people. That we may be a people that every Sunday morning we set a stage here. It doesn't matter who comes, and especially those who are the least likely to come in Del Rio. When they get here, they'll get the warmest, most cordial welcome ever. And they can realize that they were not only welcomed by us, that they were welcomed by God. That's what I pray for me, and that's what I pray for us. Let's do that now, okay? Lord, thank you for stories like this that take us by surprise, and we have to kind of work on them, try to figure out what's going on. But thank you for the heart of you, our Father, who is so clearly expressed, and his care for the people who are the furthest away, that even would run the risk of making a scene because people like us are so important to you. Help us follow your example well, love people well, represent you well, so that when they come here, then they will encounter you just like you are. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.